Welcome to Philly Fortune Talks with your host, Jake Penny, where the city's brightest minds share the secrets behind their success. Are you ready to be inspired?
Welcome to another episode of Philly Fortune Talks, where we explore the inspiring stories of Philadelphia's most dedicated and innovative individuals. Today, we have the pleasure of speaking with Toby Johnson, a passionate advocate for children's education who have made significant strides in reading, in the field of reading. Originally from Idaho, Toby has spent the last 15 years focusing on improving children's literacy. His journey took him from Beijing, where he spent 13 years, to the University of Pennsylvania, driven by the science of reading movement in America and restrictive education policies in China. At Penn, Toby enrolled in an executive-style master's program to enhance his reading program, Fun Phonics?
Yeah, very good. Fun Phonics, yes.
Fun Phonics, to introduce to American children. In Philadelphia, Toby volunteers at multiple West Philadelphia schools, sharing his love for reading and writing with students from diverse backgrounds. Through his experience teaching small groups and observing his progress, Toby discovered the transformative power of phonics and decodable books. As the architect of Fun Phonics, he assembled a talented team to create an online curriculum featuring over 275 Lexile-level decoded ebooks, amounting to 4,000 pages of engaging stories that guided students from ABCs to grade 4 reading fluency. Toby, thank you for coming on today.
Great. Thanks very much for having me today, Jake. I really appreciate the introduction as well.
Yeah, thank you. This actually kind of hits me personally, as maybe you could tell, I'm not the best reader, never was. So this is really cool that you're doing this for kids. I don't want to steal the show or anything, but my experience is that I could barely read when I was a kid. Barely had any grammar skills, and actually in school, I went to Catholic school, and in fourth grade, actually first through fourth grade, I wasn't even in the schools in the same classrooms as the other kids. I was actually in the trailers outside of the schools because I couldn't keep up with the curriculum. So that's really awesome what you're doing to help kids, learn how to read better, because it's for a lot of people, it's not easy.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned that, Jake, because you're definitely not alone there. There's a lot of students that they have trouble learning to read. It's a common thing, and because it's not an intuitive thing, people aren't born with the ability to read by a certain age. It has to be learned, and there's a lot of factors that go into it. There's the curriculum, there's the teaching style, and people have different learning styles too. So it's really hard to have a type of one-size-fits-all program that is going to help all the students learn to read and read at their grade level. So there's a lot of cases, like you'd mentioned your own backstory. I had a cousin who's a very, very smart person. Sometimes people get kind of labeled, or they label themselves as being, behind or something like that, just if they're not reading at speed by a certain time. But yeah, my cousin, he's a doctor now. He went to Ivy League school, but I think grade 3, he had checked himself out of school because he was so frustrated because he couldn't read. Yeah, really remarkable guy. Checked himself out of school.
Oh man!
Of course, he had to go back later once his mom found out. But yeah, for that day, he was good to go.
That's awesome. So how did this vision and this want to come to fruition, to want to help children in reading? What's the backstory with that?
Good question. So as a college student, I was a volunteer reading tutor at my school's after-school tutoring program. So I was teaching a first grader to learn to read, and I found that work to be quite meaningful. So I'd previously been working in finance, economics, and those things for my internships during college, during undergrad. And that time teaching the kid to learn to read was very meaningful, and I found that very enjoyable work. So I liked it a lot. And then after graduating, there's a bit of a longer story there, but after graduating very quickly, I was teaching kids mainly to learn to read. And I found it very meaningful work. It's fun. Yeah.
That's awesome. So did you do that back in Beijing as well?
Right, yes. So after graduation, I graduated in 2009 during the financial crisis. And so having background in economics and finance, I had a job, but it was not a great time to be working in that industry. So I had a couple of classmates who were going to Beijing, and they said that they could get me a job teaching English over in China. I went over there quickly, found it was very interesting, very fun, but the whole environment was like slightly messy in terms of how they were teaching kids, like big groups, students at different levels and things like that. So I was working at the largest school there called New Oriental, and that school, I think they meant well, but the class sizes were just massive and the students were at different
Mm.
levels. So I saw that there was a lot of opportunity to improve that situation. It was a wet market in terms of opportunity for teaching children English, but in particular helping them with their reading too. So I started a small school there, and then we grew a team over time to help more students learn to read. But yeah, it was eventually like about 300 students in the classes there, but they were after school classes and things like that. And through the process, we found that the students, they all read differently, but there are some common aspects to teaching kids how to learn to read, and phonics was extremely important. So we were reading American papers that were coming out from, US universities on reading research. The papers were always there, but the American elementary schools themselves a lot of them were using different methods to learn how to read. That may have been pushed on them by publishers, or they may have been popular, and things like that. So we were just using what was working for us in China, which was like the research-backed method, science of reading aligned phonics instruction. So our books were focused on decoding skills, learning to read with phonics, step by step, piece by piece, and that was working. And I was like, I wonder what is going on in the schools in the U.S. Like, why aren't they using this type of method? But I thought, okay, maybe it's because they're native speakers or something else. So that was like sort of the background. And then later, there was a big story that came out it was actually called Soul the Story by Emily Hanford, a podcast. And it was one of the top podcasts in the US because it was addressing this big tragedy of American children learning to read with methods that weren't research backed, and some of the problems that were occurring because of that.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a pure case study. My mom and dad sent me to countless after school programs, hired tutors, sent me to summer schools all over the place to learn how to read better. And I mean, it's very long ago, but I feel like there was no like everybody did it a different way. And I mean, my parents spent a lot of money, and I mean it's still not fixed. So that probably is a lot of the methods that weren't science backed or that weren't truly evaluated. So what you're doing is amazing, and I wish I had that had your program back then.
Oh, cheers. Thanks, Jake. But yeah, no, it's before the schools could kind of pick what curriculum they wanted to use, and the publishers, they would push things that were palatable for the teachers to use, but maybe not necessarily working for the kids. And it wasn't any single person's fault. Like there was a Columbia University Teachers College professor named Lucy Calkins. She was really popular, and I think she was doing her best too. I'm sure not a bad person at all. But the program was so successful because like the teachers liked it. And the teachers were doing their best too. There's no like one party here who should have any blame for it. If there were maybe the publishers, I think they should have known what they were doing, before pushing these books on them. I do think the publishers probably should have known better. But now, fortunately, it's either finished or under consideration at a number of state legislatures. I believe it's over a third of the state legislatures in the U.S. They are they've already made it illegal, or they are making it illegal. It's under consideration to not allow a non-research backed method for teaching kids to read. So people, now that they're aware of the issue, they're catching up fast. So yeah, that's good. It was just really unfortunate time that went on for over a decade.
Yeah, no, I mean, we're going back to like early 2000s, when I started learning how, well, obviously that's when I was in school and everything like that. But I went to Catholic school, I went to private school, and they all told totally different things. And when I transferred to actually public school, that was in fifth grade, and fourth grade was in Catholic school, fifth grade in public school. Public school was already way ahead of Catholic school. So like like I must have missed out on a year of school pretty much because of the curriculum base. And I got screwed across the board. I never learned decimals or fractions, like other reading stuff. Like it sucked. I was definitely behind, and that didn't help anything else. But just having a good program, or because everybody's a machine, right? There's no one size fits all. Everybody learns a certain way, so why not treat students and children that way? They learn a special way. That's how they learn. So cultivate like schooling to them. Not just like a spray and pray method, like you said in China, packing 100 kids into a room and trying to thinking that they're all going to learn the same way. I just don't feel like that's not the right way. So that's now, do you have a school in Philadelphia, correct? Online program and everything?
Yeah, we have an online program. It's global, so anyone can access the reading program online. It's phonics.com, phunics.com. So instead of phonics, it's phonics. Yeah, so there's over 200 Lexile-level decodable books on there. And so if you do have students who learn in different, who are within one grade, but they might be at different points within that grade, then they can hop into the program at their level. There's an online level test, so they can determine their level, like a good starting point, and then move forward from that appropriate starting point. Because if for example, in your case, you were kind of tossed in to a fifth grade classroom, but you may have needed to make up some of the foundation skills, the fundamental skills to help you get up to grade level. And so if you just start trying to teach with like the fifth grade skills, like it's going to be a rough road, in terms of getting caught up. Those curricula are scaffolded in such a way so that people can go step by step and make the connection. So if you try to cut out a number of steps, you're going to be in a rough spot. So that's one of the benefits of our program, is it has the sounds and the skills that kids need within different difficulty levels of books. Yeah, so it's an online program. There's quizzes, there's audio, a lot of the books are cultural. So we have some tales from China, from India, we've got one under development from Africa, another one from the Middle East, also from Europe, like Aesop's Fables, and then Latin legends as well. So we try to make the stories fun and interesting, and the stories that have some real cultural value, so that the kids don't feel like they're doing something quite boring with fonts, such as flashcards or things like that. We try to help them read through actually reading interesting stories rather than chants or flashcards or things like that.
Wow. Yeah, I think another one of the problems with me growing up was that I was just reading. They had me reading boring stuff. So that's really cool that you're keeping it vibrant and like ever changing with different cultures and everything, because it makes it fun. It's something they never really experienced or heard of, so it's more interesting to them. And that's definitely ADHD, ADD, whatever you want to call it. They diagnosed me with. Hey, if it doesn't catch your eye, if it's not interesting you, you're not really going to immerse yourself into it. So that's great that it's the way you do it. But staying on top in any field is really tough, right? And definitely, in your sector of the world and business and everything. But what's something that is exciting that you see on the horizon in your industry, and how are you getting ready for it?
Good question. Yeah, so I would say one of the interesting things going on in education is there is a little bit of disruption coming from improved AI. So the education industry is ripe for disruption. A lot of industries have been disrupted in meaningful ways. But education has not been disrupted by technology in the same way that a lot of industries have, such as finance or ride sharing, food delivery, and things like that. So education, is kind of ripe for disruption through the use of technology. And I think that currently, because the AI has gotten better, now bear in mind this AI sort of buzz hype that's going around. It's not all parts of AI that have like improved in tandem, but due to the increased level of investment and things like that, there are it's kind of like a lot have. And so in education, one of the more interesting areas for us has been speech to text. So say, for example, if a kid is reading one of our books, one thing that we're developing now is an auto grading platform. So if a kid is reading a book and they make a mistake, then the program can identify what phoneme, so like what part of the word tripped them up, and what reading skill they need to work on in order to understand how to read that phoneme or that kind of word in the future. So before we were doing that, when we developed the books, we would listen with our own ear, and then we would break down the kids reading to figure out like what their problem was. We'd categorize it into their top 3 reading errors, and then make a recommendation for how to like fix those errors. But it's very labor intensive, so it was costing us on once somebody was trained to do that, about $20 per recording. So I mean, a kid can pretty much buy a new book for $20. It's kind of expensive to get a report, and we are giving reports for every single story that they read. So it's cost prohibitive to do that, but it's very helpful for the student. But now with the current AI, it's almost good enough to be able to give a good report back to the kid that can encourage them to go read a book that will focus on the reading skill that they need. So right now we're training our own model. And the cool thing is we're using a different accent. So the thing that we want to do now, we're still waiting for approval, but we want to get partnership with some of the schools I tutor at in West Philadelphia to see if we can get their students involved so that their accents can be included in the training data. So if you're training a AI model, but it's only based on mainstream accents or mainstream pronunciation, then if somebody reads without that accent, they could get misguided advice, which is harmful for the students. So we really need, as a country, we need to be able to include everybody into the training data. So that's one of the exciting things that we're working on now to make it economically feasible to give kid a very good reading recommendation report without the cost of having a human grader. So yeah, it just takes quite a bit of time because we have to, at present, we need to flag the reading errors and make a token out of it, and then to use that new information to train the model.
Wow, you're going all in with that. You're even going to have the accents and everything. Wow, that's intense in a really good way. In a really good way, because the majority of programs I feel is honestly American accents. Sometimes you hear like a European British accent on like a audio book or something like that. But to have the students tailored to their accents and the way they learn, I mean, that's all clicking up here in their mind at any given time. So it's like, yeah, they'll learn whatever, call it 20% faster by, having their accent instead of an accent that's not native to them.
Yeah, it sounds kind of simple. You're like, oh, like, why don't we accept all accents? Like British accent, that sounds cool, right? Well, it is very cool until you're giving feedback to a kid. And if the kid so West Philadelphia has actually its own accent. So of course, these things are they're kind of codified, or that they are represented in a broad brush fashion. But
Mm.
generally speaking, you could say there's 11 different accents, even in the United States. Now, that's not really including any foreign accents. So if you have immigrants coming from different language backgrounds, then that number could go up real fast. But just even within the U.S., people born in the U.S., there are, depending on how you count, but about 10, 11 different accents. Actually, West Philadelphia has one of those national accents. So that's why we're pretty excited to work with those guys. But the problem is if you have one of those accents and you read a word and you've improved your reading, so that maybe before you saw, say it was a word like, computer. First word comes to mind, computer, and then you're, before you read it like, come top, totally miss it. And then after studying some of the target sounds and things like that, then you're able to read it, and you might read like computer with a slightly different accent. Maybe it's computer or something, but it wouldn't be the way that your parents say it. So maybe it's the way that your parents say it, but the program would not recognize that improvement quite in the same way if it hasn't been trained with the right kind of data. So it could tell you that, again, you were like wrong. And that's pretty frustrating for a kid if they're actually making progress, or maybe they're reading it the way that would make sense in their learning context, but they get told it's wrong. Then what are you going to do with that feedback? You're going to go try to fix it. But it's frustrating for a kid if they're actually making progress or reading it correctly, they get, feedback saying that they haven't improved. And that's because the model is trained on different pronunciations.
Okay. Yeah, it's almost like the wooder or water, that type of thing.
Yeah, I think that was like Canadian.
I don't even know. It's funny though, because you said that West Philadelphia has an accent, and I get it all the time. I'm not from Philadelphia, right outside of Philadelphia, Delaware County, Southeast Pennsylvania. And I would, even people from like Bucks County, or call it Lancaster, would be like, wow, you have an accent. And I'm like, what are you talking about? I do not have an accent. I sound just like you. They're like, no, you have an accent. Where are you from? I'm like, geez, I didn't know it was that bad. So, but that's really cool. It just because it's America doesn't mean there's, 20, like you said. How many accents are there?
There's different ways to count them, but we can go with 10.
Okay, not including like the deep South people are like, howdy, partner. We probably are not counting those, or are we counting those?
We're counting those.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's really cool. So what you probably have a team. I know you have a team behind you. What is your leadership style like, and what kind of, you said you bring culture to the books. How are you bringing culture to the organization?
Good question. So we have been fortunate to have a bunch of good people on our team. So we didn't have a lot of toxic stuff in our team, or anything that was. We've had some diversity in our team from the very beginning, because a lot of we had pretty much half of our staff were from China, different parts of China, and then another half were from the U.S. And maybe different parts of the U.S. And then because there were of the expat community in Beijing and things like that, we were able to work together, to hang out, do team building activities together, and things like that. So that was part of kind of breaking down cultural barriers or any other type of barriers within our team. So that was an important thing. And then celebrating different cultures has been important. Then after COVID, we kind of needed to move out of China. So a lot of people, because when COVID first hit in China, they would go to another place. So it might have been one of our team members had gone to Singapore, one went to France, another one went to Switzerland, and then Turkey. So we're kind of all over the place, and it's always been, important to say, oh, how is it over there? Everyone on our team really likes travel, so we're always curious. And that's been important too. And then anytime there've been a couple rare instances where there was somebody who was making inappropriate comments about different cultures and things like that. And we usually found a way to show that was not welcome. So it's important to show that any type of derogatory or unfriendly comments are not welcome. And a lot of it has to do with being pretty tight on the jokes too. Like knowing when it's a joke and then it's not a joke. Just you gotta you kind of gotta tighten that stuff up. Otherwise, it's just not a fun environment if the team's taking cheap shots at each other.
Right. It doesn't fit the bigger vision, the purpose, and everything like that, right? So what does a day in a life look like for you? How do you juggle everything? You have a bunch of team members. You're a global company, so I mean you have to have your hands full.
Yeah, it's a very small team actually now. So I think it's probably about maybe five, six people, depending on how you count full time or part time. But we have so different time zones and things like that, and different people are working on different projects. So a typical day would be, pretty normal. Maybe wake up and quickly work with people in the China time zone because that time zone is going to be late at night there. And then after that stuff is sorted, then pretty much, depending on what project we're working on. So maybe one day it might be this AI speech to text project. Another day it might be working with Illustrator to create more images for our books. All of our books are artists. The illustrations are made by artists. We have some flashcards and game pictures that are made by AI, but all the art in our books is made by real people. So working with those guys, maybe working with the authors to edit the scripts to make them appropriate for children at different levels, things like that. And then also I love tutoring. So I tutor Mondays and Tuesdays at the schools in West Philadelphia. Right now I'm just at one school, Commerce. But yeah, that's really refreshing. I think it's very important for anybody working in education to be able to see the students that are actually going to be using the products.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Be fully immersed in what you're doing, because then you fully connect with them too, instead of just being through a screen. You don't get. I feel like with anything, it's just like, for instance, Zoom meetings or anything like that. Is like over COVID. It was like, yeah, you're in it, but you're not fully connected to that person on the other side, right? It's not, you don't get the same human interaction if you were in person. And then you also, I'm sure in the education space, you start to see these children right in front of your eyes evolve into better readers too. So that's like super cool, where you can't really, you can see that over a video or a recording device, but it's like to see with your own eyes and to be a part of it in that environment is probably super rewarding.
Yeah, it is rewarding, and sometimes you do kind of need to be there in person. Even though our main product is we have print and digital products, but the in-person part is nice because you can kind of sometimes, especially with children, you actually need to kind of like sort out what's going on. So we had at the tutoring that I was doing after they finished their school homework, that's when I get to work with them on literacy. And so a kid had finished his homework, and I said, oh, "Okay, great, you can go. Let's go grab a book." And he said, "Teacher, I can't read." And this is a really cute kindergarten kid. He said, like, "You can't read." So I said, "Okay." And of course, like I just met this kid, so I was not familiar with his background. I said, well, "Let's go try. Let's go have a look at the book. I'll help you." And we got one of the beginning reader sets. So one just like if they know the ABCs, it starts with like 2-letter words. So like started with that book, and we I got it with him, and was teaching them how to segment the word, break the word out into letters. So maybe the word would have been it. So helping him it. And we were doing that, and he was after 10 minutes. This is because he knew the ABCs, and he had good teachers too. So after 10 minutes, we were able to finish that story, and with support. But he, the look in his eyes, he was happy, like really, quite thrilled with himself. And so,
That's
yeah,
all.
that type of thing is hard to it's hard to identify that type of situation, unless you're there in person. So it's I really appreciate that tutoring opportunity.
Yeah, yeah. So running a successful business is obviously not made for everybody, but how do you approach financial planning to ensure stability? Because cliche, the wheels on the bus still have to go around and around with schooling. So how do you what does that look like, keeping the business flowing and growing and on track all the time?
Good question. Actually, financial planning is not exactly my forte, but so I try to not take undue risks. So with that stuff, so usually have a plan, make a plan for a year and think, okay, what are the things that we definitely want to get done, and who are the people that we definitely need to retain, and trying to balance that, the staff retention with the research and development type of projects that we want to do, like the and how do we explain that to our staff that we're investing in these new things that might not they might not pay out for a while, if at all. So trying to manage the team morale around that stuff, and then not taking any undue risks with the finances. It's really important for education companies or anyone who gets the revenue first, sometimes far in advance. So we still have students who learn online and they pay for live classes. So for those guys, they might be paying their tuition for, maybe it's a half year in advance, or sometimes it's even more. And so you got to be careful that you don't spend that money before it's actually earned. So we make sure to say, like, okay, when's the money been earned? And if the students haven't had the class, or they haven't gone through one of our online reading programs, then we don't count the revenue as earned. We don't book that as like a earned profit. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So
I
being
think
conservative, yeah, being conservative.
a lot of people get in trouble for doing that. It's like, hey, yeah, it's revenue in yet, but the job isn't completed. So don't spend that revenue or don't place it anywhere until it has been appropriately allocated to that specific, service or whatever service is rendered may be. But no, that's awesome. That's awesome. So for anyone, wanting to follow or in your footsteps or similar on the mission of helping children become better readers, how would you suggest that they go about that?
Good question. I mean, an important thing anytime you're working with children is to keep an open mind. So and see like what's actually working. So at the end of the day, the kids need to learn how to read. They need to also be interested in reading and things like that. So I would always, like, first and foremost, encourage people to have a look at where the rubber hits the road. So what happens with the kid when they encounter an actual book or an actual story? That's the important thing, because you might have worksheets or videos or flashcards or things like that. And then, but keep in mind, foremost, what happens when that kid encounters a story or when that kid encounters a book. What's their feeling? Are they more confident? Do they like reading? That's really important for how they perceive themselves as a student, is if they are able to read the book, if they like reading. So I would say, like, have a very clear emphasis on actual results for the kids for whatever program that you're reading. And when you're selecting a program, or if you're trying to develop your own program, I think it's important to have a look at the research, and not just like whatever buzzwords are flowing around. Like right now, there's a lot of buzzwords flowing around: reading, science of reading, decodable, phonics, things like that. Don't just look for that thing stamped on a book. Actually have a look at what a lesson will look like, and maybe try teaching a couple lessons before you select the curriculum, or at least have an idea in your mind what an actual lesson will look like. It's easy to put things in a teacher manual and make a lesson plan, but without actually going through the lesson and seeing how kids react to it, it's hard to understand the long term benefits, or even short term. So yeah, I would say be careful. Yeah, be careful. do the research, don't get caught up in the buzzwords, and always keep your focus on the student, and if that way of learning to read is going to increase the student's interest in reading and have good results.
Perfect. Thank you for sharing that, Toby. Well, it was a pleasure having you on here on Philly Fortune Talks. For anybody that wants to dive deeper with you and connect with you, what's the best place, or how should someone go about doing that?
Great. Yeah, so our website is phonics.com, phunics.com. My email is toby@usaenglish.org, and I have LinkedIn as well.
Awesome, Toby. Well, it was a pleasure having you today.
Great. Thanks very much, Jake. I really appreciate this opportunity.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to Philly Fortune Talks with Jake Penny. Inspired to share your success story? Visit phillyfortunetalks.com/guest and let's inspire together.